This is a clip from the latest episode of the Game Football podcast from The Times. To listen to the full show, go to wherever you get your podcasts.
It's a Southern takeover. Surrounded by Southerners.
No, I'm the only genuine one. Well, we've established that already.
You're the only proper
I'm the only
Southerner.
London-born and bred one here.
London is... There's more than the south than London, Gary. Come on, don't be classic Londoner. Classic Londoner.
We've established that 5 minutes ago.
You're not gonna bite on that, Alison?
No.
You're happy being cast as a Southerner? No? Yeah? You okay?
I'm partly Southern because I live in the south. I own that. But, you know, darned well I'm a northerner.
Yeah. Let's check that accent again, shall we? How's that?
Bathgrass.
Yes, there we go. Now we're talking. Anyway, I only did this to use it as a link just to say that when I'm surrounded by Southerners, I always look to the north. And let's do that to the start of this show by going to Manchester United, to be exact. I was going to say a poor game. I'd say a dreadful game. Really, really bad game. And I wanted to start by opening with Paul Hurst's match report, the first couple of paragraphs, because I think it tees up a couple of good issues. He writes on the Times website now, halfway through one of the most tedious first halves of a forgettable season for Manchester United fans, the Stretford end broke into voice and turned their ire on Sir Jim Ratcliffe. 66 quid, you're taking the piss, they sang. Ratcliffe, who raised the cost of resale tickets to £66 and scrapped concessions, will continue to fill Old Trafford. Such is the demand for tickets given the club's vast fan base and history. But how can the United co-owner argue that this team is providing value for money or enjoyment at present? Some defending champions of the FA Cup go down fighting, but it took Fulham precious little effort to prise United's hands from the trophy here. Alison. Lots of themes. See, he crams a lot into four paragraphs, doesn't he, old Hursty? Jim Ratcliffe, the focus of the fans' frustration, not Ruben Amorim, perhaps slightly because once you've had a go at so many managers, you can only keep having a go at them for so long. But Ruben Amorim making headlines, as he always does. He just cannot help himself, can he? Talking about winning the title, focusing on that now, and then subsequently being called naive by former Manchester United player Wayne Rooney. I wanted to start with that bigger picture stuff and come to you about all that stuff and what you made of, Amorim, the Ratcliffe comments, and some of the themes that Paul Hurst mentions there.
Well, it is going to go down as one of the most ludicrous things in football that someone like Jim Ratcliffe, who, he's 70-something and he's got vast experience in business and in sport, and he actually thinks that if you make staff just eat fruit and soup and make cuts that are kind of almost seem quite cruel and nasty and sort of mill owner from the 1800s sort of thing, that it's going to have an impact on what fans really care about, which is stylish football and winning. And so the contrast between the two just makes the former seem more ludicrous, really, and also makes you think, what does he think is wrong with Manchester United? Is he just simply trying to look tough, and that he came in, inherited a behemoth that was run oddly and poorly, and he's probably, what's he thinking? He's thinking if you start with the small, you get big. I'm not really sure what the thinking is there, because there are much bigger things wrong with Manchester United than how many staff get an extra bread roll for the lunch hour. So I can see why the fans are starting to turn on him, because it's like he's in some sort of tunnel vision where he sees things that make Man United a poor business model, which it is, but that's not why people turn up every week. They're not turning up to discuss who has free lunches at the club. They're turning up to discuss, have they worked out what was wrong with recruitment? Have they worked out what was wrong with managerial appointments? Have they worked out what was wrong in the post-Ferguson era and what they can do about that, and how they can, to bring it back to money, how can they cash in on their worldwide status and just how huge they are? But instead, he's creating this entity which sounds small because he's talking about small things. It's the sort of thing your corner shop might do to try and make a profit. It's small things, and the performances are small as well. There's no swagger. There's no sense of our history is going to see us through into the final again. So the whole thing is becoming a joke. So one of the least surprising things I thought was that the fans were turning on Jim Ratcliffe.
I mean, if you sort of take out what's happened in the past and sort of many mistakes they've made, they actually remind me of what Arsenal did a few years ago, where they had people like Raul, Mr. Stat, they had all these multiple people at the top trying to make decisions on players. And United seen the same thing. They have an awful lot of cooks there. You've got Ratcliffe's bunch, you've got Glaze, you've got this bunch, you've got that bunch. And anyone you talk to who works there says there's just too many people above, too many people meddling, too many people on the outside. Ratcliffe's got his own people on the side. I won't name who people are involved. But and all of that doesn't make for harmony in terms of one direction for the club going in the right direction. And then anyone who knows the Amram's style from Sporting, the players don't obviously fit that. So that's another thing. So it's similar to what Tottenham had, where they had multiple managers and a collection of players that didn't fit Conte, didn't fit Mourinho, didn't fit Ange, and that takes years to kind of turn around to try and change. I mean, Pete made a very good point about the wing backs yesterday, but Amram's wing back at Sporting was Porro, who can deliver a cross properly. So it's kind of if that's his system, and Conte had the same thing at Tottenham. If that's your system based on your wing back, you need to have a proper wing back who fits your system. You know, you can't just have him muddle around with what you've got and we just use him because he was at the club or whatever, or you know. So it feels like there's so many challenges they've got to do going forward, really. And I think the too many cooks is a big issue, because you in any business, and I think going back to your point about the kind of small things, you know, in any business, if you start doing that, you kill all goodwill between the staff. Yeah. You know, we've seen it so many times, and sure, maybe they have to make cuts, but when you start getting penny pinching, you start to annoy people, and then you'll start to get more leaks, you'll get more toxicity, which already exists there anyway. And then so what happens then? Where does it go? And then when Arteta changed Arsenal, he'd already played at the club, so he had an understanding of the club. Amran is a young guy. He doesn't have that understanding the same way.
Are you calling him naive as well?
I don't think he's naive. I think he's very honest, isn't he? Sometimes
he's great. He's so
honest.
Great.
He's great for
do
copy.
Not want it to stop.
We do want to stop. You know, he's great for copy, isn't he?
Keep it coming, Ruben.
Yeah, he's great.
In terms coming back to the game though, because I think you guys have both addressed some of the big picture points there. Coming back to the game, Pete. I mean, Fulham deserved to win this game, didn't they? Talking, you know, Paul Hurst talking there with that final line I read out that it took precious little effort to win this game, but Fulham were still good and well worthy of the win.
Yeah, I mean, Fulham were good, but I would say it was one of their poorer performances of the season, and I think that says a hell of a lot about Manchester United. Gary touched on the wing-backs point. You could see what they were trying to do, because Fulham liked to bomb on with the full-backs, with Robinson and Castagna at times. So De Ligt would get it. I thought De Ligt had a good game. That's one of the better performances I've seen from him. Big switches of play, one-on-one for your wing-backs. It was Dalot and Mazraoui. Such a deficit of quality. They just lacked so much. You know, if you isolate someone one-on-one, you need them to be winning those one-on-ones. That's what they're trying to do. They were trying to create those overloads in that way. Use the space that Fulham left. It just didn't happen. There was no focal point in the box. I thought Rasmus Højlund had a pretty poor game again, and you could see that he's struggling with confidence. And that point can just be played around the squad, and you know it's hard to avoid the big picture stuff when it contrasts so strongly with what you see on the field. You know, I mean, there was a ticket price protest yesterday, wasn't there, with United fans and Fulham fans as well. And it's, you know, you're raising those ticket prices for this product, which is just not good enough, and you're playing Fulham, and you know Fulham. And we'll talk a lot about Fulham because we have done previously on the podcast about how well they're doing and the work that Marco Silva's done. But they didn't need to leave. I felt like in the first half it was like first gear from Fulham, and they still took the lead, and it still felt like they were the more likely to score.
And they still, even though I would say Fulham were below par, they still played the attractive football.
Yeah, and you could very clearly see what they were doing. You could see what everyone's roles were, which has always been the case with Marco Silva. And
forced Onana to make quite a few saves as well. I think.
Good saves as well.
Some very good saves. Gary, you wanted to pick a couple of Fulham players.
I thought Bassi did. He
is one of my new favourite players.
I mean,
every time I watch him,
he's improving though before your eyes, isn't he?
So
it's
someone
great
who
to
was
see.
involved in the deal when he came to Fulham said to me, he's quite raw. You know, you're never quite sure what you're going to get. But I think he's a little bit raw. You can see that he makes mistakes, but he's such a good player, isn't he? He's got a lot of potential to be a decent defender if he can cut out the mistakes. And there were a few little mistakes in the second half, but I thought he's so determined. And probably Anderson helps him out a bit in that sort of system. And it just works, doesn't it? It just works. And Iwobi, I thought as well, because, you know, he's had a good season for a guy who came through at Arsenal with very talented, but didn't really ever deliver. And then this role really suits him. You've probably seen him a lot more, both of you, haven't you? But he feels like he's really suited to this role.
Well, it's going to be tough to pick the Fulham player of the season because Iwobi was nailed on until about January, I think, and then other players have come through. But that's what you want from a team, isn't it? But just to sum up, if you like, Man United are Fulham's bogey team. They haven't beaten them in the Cup since 1908 or something. They haven't beaten them at all, except once in the last 15 years. In recent seasons, they've been losing to Man United while being the better team. Twice this season, they've lost 1-0, and you came away thinking, Fulham were the better team in
It's
that.
always last
How did
minute.
that happen? How
It's
did that happen?
I think it's five of the last 6, apart from the game they won at Old
Yeah,
Trafford.
exactly.
They've lost late in the
It's
game.
been so unlucky. And
Martinez
you kind of think...
with the deflected goal,
so you
wasn't it?
kind
Yeah,
of
that was a
Fulham,
recent one.
So you think, okay, this is something for United to get a bit of needle in. They can probably feel a little bit puffed out chests in this one. We're their bogey team and we're at Old Trafford. They're going to struggle. And I think that it was in Fulham's heads because I don't think they...
Oh, some serious scars for Fulham. Right? 2 years ago, that was
Oh,
unbelievable.
my goodness. Exactly. That would
meltdown.
have been hanging over it. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure Silva would have said, let's get redemption, let's get revenge, because he was sent off 2 years ago in the quarter-final, and Mitrovic was sent off and Willian was sent off. And that all happened in 40 seconds. And they were outplaying United.
And it's still
by
raw.
quite some distance.
Because I went down on Friday and had a chat with Marco Silva, and he wouldn't talk about it. And he said, I can't talk about it because I'm going to say something that will get me in trouble. Like it's just not over it. Yeah, well, and that's his view of it. Pereira said he's got fire in my belly, but like they had a hang up really coming into this fixture.
Yeah.
Like this is the stumbling block, and yet there was nothing from United they just sort of undid the fear factor of Old Trafford.
A bit of closure for Fulham and Marco Silva.
I
then.
think so.
Nice when that happens. But coming back to Manchester United then, talking about Fulham players who were impressive, not many Manchester United players were. I do increasingly feel sorry for Bruno Fernandes in this Manchester United team and in this system, because he's now playing probably as a central midfielder when he's not supposed to, and still looking like their best player by an absolute country mile. But I wanted to ask about Alejandro Garnacho, because so much has been made, and Pete, I'll ask you about this first, about Amorim and his comments and taking a tough stance and kicking Marcus Rashford out of the club, taking a similar stance with Garnacho. Obviously had that moment last weekend where he storms off down the tunnel. That's all well and good, but I think there's a real problem when you put Garnacho on and he looks like one of your best players and one of your rare outlets. You're thinking, don't know whether you can keep being so tough with him. You might have to play him all the time if you're going to win any games. What would you say?
Well, that was the point, right? In January, obviously Chelsea had an interest in him, and there was talk maybe they'll have to sell him. Again, the academy players that Man United might need to sell to balance the books. And I covered Steaua Bucharest against Man United in the Europa League, and it was really average first half, nothing particularly special. Garnacho came on at half time and was unbelievable, completely changed the game. And even just going back to what I was saying before, like that quality deficit, when someone comes on and shows that ability, that the directness, clearly has the quality in the team, and you think...
Pace as well.
Well, pace, right?
Actual
Yeah,
pace.
absolutely. Now, it's a tricky situation for Amorim, because you can see what he's trying to do. He's trying to instill some standards which have clearly slipped in recent years. But I think you're right. I think that there is definitely a level. I mean, obviously they've let Marcus Rashford go with all the issues that have surrounded him. He's at Aston Villa. Looks like he's going to be a big impact for them. He's looked very sharp already in those early games under Unai Emery. But the idea of then losing Garnacho as well, with no real clear sense, I mean, you'll know more about this as well, Gary, coming into looking at the summer, that United will be in a position to, financially, to actually make big changes to the squad that they have, which they clearly need because they've got a coach whose system is totally different to what their squad looks like. You can't really lose him. And even then, with Garnacho, he's not really the perfect fit for a 3-4-3. So, there's no easy answer with that. I think he's got to try and get him on side, get the best out of him, because when he's at his best, he's going to be such an important player for him and Amad Diallo. Obviously, Diallo's injured at the moment. But no, it's even then, we're talking about Garnacho having a big impact in the game, but his goal scoring record's been really, really poor in recent months. I think his last goal was in November in the league.
Could well be.
It's quite a long time ago. Anyway, he's not he's not producing in the same way that he has before. And that's the player we're talking about. And obviously there's Bruno Fernandes, and of course there's sympathy for him. And I think the criticism with Bruno Fernandes is about his demeanour. But I was thinking yesterday, well, if I was surrounded by this, and I would be like that, you know.
I find the demeanour thing quite strange because demeanour-wise, yesterday you couldn't have looked more like a captain. He was talking the whole game to players who looked either uninterested or completely devoid
that's
of
the point,
confidence.
isn't it? It actually
He's
shines the
turning
other
round
way.
to De Ligt and Maguire and going, "Come on, guys, push up, push," and trying to tell them instructions for how passing out. He's trying to orchestrate the whole damn thing. And scoring, by the way, a brilliant goal, I thought. That
That was
finish.
lovely, yeah.
I know Alan Shearer was raving about it, so you don't need me to, but a wonderful finish. That's the kind of one that you don't see most players be able to finish.
No,
I
on
mean,
his weaker side as well,
yeah.
just being able to turn that.
But I mean, Gary, Allison, either of you jump in on Pete's point about Manchester United players and their attack and thinking about Højlund and Xerxes. Xerxes, who I increasingly think might be quite a talented player, but again, don't know whether he fits their system or can get anything out of him. Gary?
I thought when Obi came on, they looked a little bit more lively, and actually got someone who got in the box and actually looked like he was going to cause Bassi a bit of trouble at times. And I mean, he's only a kid, and obviously he's a bit different. It's late in the game,
Yeah.
but I thought he made a little bit of a difference when he came on. Xerxes, he doesn't do much for me. I think they paid a lot of money for him, and I still don't really see it in him really.
Alison?
Well, I think that wasn't really the key moment, but the sort of telling moment I thought was Garnacho came on and pressed, and it looked odd to the eye to see see a Man United player actually trying to unsettle Fulham. Well, wow. And then, but Alan Shearer went, "Oh yeah, he's pressing, but I don't know why he's bothering. No one else is." And you kind of think, "Oh, doesn't that sum up Man United? That the player who's out of favour for off the field issues comes on with a point to prove, and no one can be bothered helping him out. Really odd."
We're talking. Pete, you posed the question about looking forward and the future, and I opened the segment by talking about the fans being focused on Jim Ratcliffe and things off the pitch. So you get the sense that Ruben Amorim, the commitment is there, and even just from a kind of PR point of view, because it would just look so terrible to not commit to him long term. Is there any sense that talking about these players, there's a kind of real like bottoming out, get rid of some, start? Gary's saying about Obi's 17-year-old looking very bright. If Manchester United fans haven't seen it, the highlights from their FA Cup youth game against Arsenal are well worth a watch, much more entertaining than 90 minutes of the senior team. If you go and check out 2 minutes of that, obviously still got the Europa League, but could be in a position of where they're out the Europa League and finishing in the bottom half of the Premier League. Start again, bring in the kids. Pete, naive, stupid.
Part of the issue they've got is actually being able to move on some of these players because of their salaries and the length of their contracts. So being able to bottom out in the way that they probably would want to is quite difficult. But yeah, I think that's going to be the alternative. They've got a good academy. There's so much pressure now on the Europa League for them, I think. It's Real Sociedad in the week, isn't it? Really got to win the competition. I mean, it's a financial point of view because of the...
Can they? Do you see them winning this competition? That's the best non-answer. That's the best answer not using words I think we've had on the podcast all season. Just a little laugh.
A little shrill. Yeah, of course they can win the competition, but we've seen so many nadirs from Manchester United this season that you wouldn't put it past a team who wants it a bit more, who cares about it a little bit more, beating them over two legs. And I guess that's one of the narratives actually from the game with Fulham and how much that game meant to Fulham, 50 years since they last got to the FA Cup final. And
yeah.
The key is, right, Man United's huge, but if you look at teams that are successful this season, they have managed, whatever their size, whether they are small, relatively small teams or not, they have managed to engender a sense of family. Everyone in it together, connections right through the building, training ground, boardroom, players, everything. It feels like a family. So if you go to clubs like Fulham or Brentford or Bournemouth or whatever, you feel like family. But big clubs have to do that as well. So Liverpool have made it's been one of the things they've really tried to do, and Klopp did this relentlessly, make sure we're a family. Make sure players say good morning to the cleaning lady. Make sure everyone knows everybody's name. Do not make yourself feel like you're part of a huge, posh entity. It's family. Chelsea's success, they had loads of dosh under Abramovich. he made sure it felt like a family, and that's how they were successful. The players knew there was this avuncular relationship. You can have what you want. You can have what you want. I love you. We're a family. And so somewhere like Manchester United, I think, needs to find that sense of family. And Radcliffe's doing the exact opposite with every sweeping move he makes.
Do you think Amorim has that
I think Amorim has the personality perhaps. I don't know. But so far, most of what he's doing is being... it's not being very nice to players, isn't it? He's being quite aggressive. And I think that comes from a sense of he's new to English football, relatively young, perhaps. I mean, his CV is good, but not like stellar. I think he's trying to always show he has the authority to manage a club as big as Man United without thinking, actually, what I might be able to bring to Man United is a sense of bringing, a sense of unity, family, and so on. I think he might be undermining his own attributes to a degree to prove that he's got strength of character.
It's a big sort of task for him to kind of turn around the team as well as turning around the club. But that's a kind of a lot on his shoulders. That's probably not what he signed up for,
Yeah, absolutely.
He signed up to turn around the team, but to do the wider picture, that shouldn't really be on his shoulders. And if it is on his shoulders, then he's a young man. It's quite difficult to do that.
That comes back to the whole decision-making point, though. It's like, I say this every time we talk about Man United, but they've dropped in someone with a very different philosophy into a team that's not fit for it, and that's above them. And everything it comes back to everything above them. And I agree with Addison on authority, because he is a young coach, and that's one of the dynamics that's hard to manage. How do I differentiate myself from a group of players that aren't really, that much younger than me? I have to do this by sometimes doing some statements, and we saw that. And then it's all about trying to come back round after doing Rashford, and then without disrupting the whole environment, which is already being undermined at the same time. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a very, very difficult position for him, and like you said, the idea of removing him. It'd be a PR catastrophe, really, considering everything else that they're doing, the cost cutting and everything else, and the wastage, at first team level that we've seen. Even the Ten Hag thing alone, that's Ratcliffe, that's Ineos, that's their decision making.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, we'll see if they can bounce back against Real Sociedad, Pete, as you mentioned, in the Europa League on Thursday. But congratulations to Fulham making it through in the FA Cup. Let's have a look at the other game that went to penalties. Bournemouth through to the quarterfinals with a win against Wolves. Pete, you were there for us. Give us a little lay of the land about how this game played out.
Yeah, it wasn't actually a great game either. It was very, very scrappy first half. I think Bournemouth had carried a bit more threat. I think Wolves struggled to adjust to Bournemouth's intensity, but got a bit better. And then Bournemouth took the lead, deservedly so. Evan Nilsson on his return. It's a big thing for Bournemouth to have him back. They've gone through a really tough run of fixtures, picked up a load of fantastic results. They're still 4 points off the top 4 and 5. He scored on his first start back, and then Bournemouth just had a bit of momentum. You felt like they were going to run away with it. They scored a second goal, and then we had 8 minutes of waiting for a VAR decision. It was on a weekend where they were introducing semi-automated offsides to make these decisions quicker. It was a complicated decision. It wasn't obvious. It was really hard to work out what was going on. They were looking at handball first. It was a corner from David Brooks to the back post. Kirkes heads it, or sort of bundles it into Dean Huijsen, and between the two of them, it's gone into the net. The check to handball, couldn't really tell, so that was fine. And then they went to offside, and it just went on and on and on.
What did you do in those 8 minutes? Did you go for a pie? Go for a pee?
I went for a stroll, actually. I thought I'd go and check out the beach. It was a lovely day on the south coast.
Have an ice cream.
I bet you contacted the PJ Mole to find out whether it's the longest ever.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, straight away.
Which is the standard one of a report. Is this the longest one ever?
Yeah, I think it was, though. I think it was the longest one.
I think the West Ham had 6 minutes a few years ago. Yeah, I think that's probably his 8.
It was an absolute farce.
There needs to be a table.
So the goal was ruled out eventually, and you had the scene where the Wolverhampton Wanderers fans, they'd been kept in the game basically because of the way the momentum was going, did not celebrate it whatsoever. You had all 4 sides of the ground berating VAR. This is embarrassing. It's not football anymore. And in principle, I'm pretty pro-VAR. I've generally been pretty pro-VAR. But when you get to a scenario where you're sitting there for 8 minutes, and there's not just the the spectacle issue. No one knows what's going on. Like, you know, the gimmick of the referee telling you what's going on after the fact, after having sat there for 10 minutes, just not knowing anything, is ridiculous. You can't have a situation where the delay is this long. It's just this. There should just be a cut-off point where it's like, actually, we can't do this in quick enough time. We move on. It was incredibly dispiriting.
Pete, welcome to the Game Podcast. You've just reached level 2 of punditry, a big, wonderfully eloquent rant about VAR. Congratulations. You're officially
you just feel sorry for everyone in the ground. That's the only thing. Like, and it's one thing on the telly, and you can feel the time when it's on the TV. I'm sure they can start doing ad breaks soon. Who knows? But when you're in the ground, it's not acceptable. It's just not an acceptable situation to have to impact on the game. But anyway, that was just the start of it. Once the football resumed, Wolves came back into it. It was generally in the second half. Bournemouth just completely dominated it. We saw the best of them. They threw on the Justin Kluivert, Dango Ouattara. Again, a team that were taking it very seriously. They couldn't beat Sam Johnston, who was outstanding in goal for Wolves. Extra time, more and more saves from Johnston, some great point-blank saves tonight, Lewis Cook, Luis Sinisterra. And then we get to the 119th minute. Wolves have survived almost to penalties, and their star man completely loses the plot. Coming together with Milos Kerkez, I think he was pulling his shirt, and it was right in front of us in the press box. And now, you know, because of the nature of the game, copy was all over the place, head down in the laptop, and you just look up and you just see this sort of coming together as, you know, the referee blows his whistle, and then suddenly there's Cunha waving, almost, I don't want to say punching, it was sort of hitting, it's sort of like in the in-between. Flailing, yeah, that's a good way of describing it. Then he kicked him when he was on the ground, and then as he got up, went to him, then motioned the headbutt, and you think, oh my God, he's probably lost the plot here. Obviously it's a red card. Totally inexplicable, particularly, and I think Wolves fans will be absolutely furious with him, because Wolves have got themselves into a position where they're 5 points clear of the bottom three. Their next run of games are crucial. This is like this could end the season for them, secure their position in the Premier League. I think it's Everton, West Ham, and Southampton, and then they play Ipswich.
That looks right. Yeah,
and Cunha's just ruled himself out of all three of them, probably more, because obviously he's had previous season. He had a too much ban for the incident after the Ipswich game where he, what was it? He took the glasses off the Ipswich town member of security. It was madness. Vitor Pereira after the game tried to defend him a bit, saying like he was tired, he had a hamstring injury, he played for much longer than we wanted him to. And he said he didn't speak to him, and he said, you know, like when I have an argument at home with my wife, I'll wait till the next day. But
not always the best way.
I actually disagree. Don't let it simmer overnight. But obviously there's the Premier League aspect, but then also he would have been the fifth penalty taker who ultimately, you know, missed for Wolves and allowed Bournemouth to win the game.
Well, as you say, Wolves fans furious as well. Fantasy football fans across the land furious as well of having him in our team, you know, planned for the week, and now he's out for the next 3
game
games.
Week 29, blank game week. It's a good one to bring in.
Absolutely. Yeah. But just on him finally, because obviously, as you say, so much has been made of him this season, carrying Wolves a lot of the time. One of their star players almost certainly will be linked with a move this summer, you would have thought. Do we think that moments like this might start people thinking, oh, this counts against him if he's so good, but he's so, you know, volatile?
He's definitely volatile. He
got this in that he might end up missing 8 games a season.
Yeah, I think that play will certainly.
He never just walks off, does he?
No, he had to.
There's always 20 blokes trying to guide him down the tunnel.
Do we think that could be the case?
Yeah, but
would that count against him, or is he so good that if you were Arsenal or one of the bigger teams, you'd be thinking, sign him anyway?
Too temperamental, I think.
I think
I think someone like Arteta wouldn't take a risk on that. He's too much of a control freak.
There'll be Arsenal fans heartbroken at that, Gary.
Yeah, I think he's too much of a control freak. He wouldn't like the idea that someone's got a decent chance of being sent off.
Right.
So I don't think he would do that.
Interesting.
I don't know. Can you think of it? I mean, whether Forest come in again, I don't know.
Right.
Sort of.
No, it all depends, doesn't
I mean,
it?
he signed a new contract, didn't he? So whether he's got what he wants now, whether he finds another club, whether he just stays.
It will depend on whether the manager of the bigger club has that sort of ego and personality which makes them think, I can turn him around. I can sort out his emotional problems. I can deal with a player like that. but you probably can't. I mean, it'd be interesting to know why he is the way he is. Is it because he thinks he's too big for his team, or does he feel? Or the flip of that is actually, if you think about it, the pressure of being the star player and being creative, and maybe when the game is starting to, run away from the team, and you feel you've got to do something special, and you do something special. I mean, I don't know what the emotional toll of that is.
Do you not feel that on this podcast, Alison, all the time? Carrying
continuously, but it might not be it might be a rescuable factor if he's not very good at being the big fish in a small pond.
But then he's not recognising the responsibilities of the wider picture. Like
I'm playing devil's advocate. I suspect he might be an over emotional person.
I suspect,
I think he's certainly definitely your former point. Like he's enjoying being the star for Wolves. I think you got a sense like the first 15, 20 minutes, every time he gets the ball, he's got such a swagger, this unbelievable confidence. You think, blimey, you really are strutting around here. But then he delivers. I didn't even mention the goal that he scored. It was unbelievable. No backlift, standing, one touch, kept absolutely no chance in the second half. And maybe it is a question of whether someone can just sort of rail him in a bit. And you're right, it is a pressurised situation for Wolves, and it's just the timing of the red card was it was a little bit inexplicable. But he is the kind of player, again maybe playing a bit of devil's advocate, who does get fouled a lot. He was fouled a lot. Bournemouth are a high intensity team. They commit a lot of fouls.
Yeah,
Wolves were kicked a lot. He was kicked a lot. And that's, I suppose there's just an element of refining that, isn't there? I suppose.
Yeah, but if you're prone to a red mist moment, I mean, you are, aren't you? I don't know what you do to stop that happening.
It's just who he is, whether someone will take the risk on him going
I
forward.
think there are plenty of players who've never been able to kind of lose it.
There certainly have. Gary. We could list many of them, but we'll see what's to come for Wolves and for Bournemouth. We know Bournemouth face Manchester City in the next round of the FA Cup. City beating Plymouth to end Plymouth's brilliant cup run, and I just wanted to say thank you very much to Plymouth for keeping the FA Cup spirits alive this season, certainly for me on the editing floor, that's for sure.